And you're very welcome along to another edition of Tipcast. My name is Shane Brophy, sports editor of the Nina Guardian, joined once again by my Noel Dundon, local G reporter in Tipperary, and this week joined by Paula Shaughnessy from the Limerick Leader, but also the host of the Maroon and White podcast. So we're well versed in terms of all things Galway and all things Limerick, looking ahead to both All-Ireland Senior Hurling quarterfinals this weekend. Noel, I'll start with you. Just a quick reflection on last weekend. I suppose we got the two results we expected. Dublin to beat Kildare, probably more comfortable than we expected. And you were in Portlaoise to see Tipp, I suppose, do what they had to do, really. And I suppose, got through the game, no injuries. I thought they were pretty... I was encouraged by the way we started the game 1-5 to no score, killed Laois off straight away, and I maybe bar a bit of sloppiness coming up to halftime. I thought we were pretty tuned in. Like, there was very little sloppiness. Okay, maybe one or two things where maybe lads took a few do things you would ordinarily do maybe in a tighter game, but I thought all in all the mentality and focus was what was needed for that game.
Yeah, I think Tipp were kind of bang on cue, Shane, really. They went into Portlaoise, and as you say, they did what they did. To me, the biggest bonus coming away from Portlaoise on Saturday evening was the fact that everybody was intact and that there were no injuries, because it was a very slippery surface with all that heavy rain on top of a hard ground, and very easy for fellas to, damage a knee or damage an ankle or something like that. So thankfully, everybody came through unscathed, and they did some of the things that they did were done really, really well. Game was over after 5 minutes, really, I would say. We were 1-5 to no score in front. Willie Connors hurling up a storm at midfield, and that early goal then from Jason Ford, which really. I don't think Laois had any great thoughts of causing an upset, to be honest. I think they probably didn't want to be there. They certainly didn't want to be there after 5 minutes, and probably the big question that remained after the weekend really was, why are we playing these McDonagh Cup finalists in the All-Ireland series? Because certainly the results didn't help them and won't help teams going forward either, I would think,
Yeah, I suppose, that was probably the one thing, Paul, in terms of there definitely is a growing clamour for, maybe, I don't know if the preliminaries to be removed, but maybe the McDonagh Cup teams not to be involved in that. And I'd be of the same view. I think the McDonagh Cup final is the All-Ireland. Like, I put out a tweet last weekend, and that, like, the McDonagh Cup was essentially created. I suppose when the round robin came in, there was the likes of Offaly, Laois, maybe the Antrims were going to be left behind, and they feared that if there was no link, these teams wouldn't take that competition seriously. I think 9 years on, it has proven to be a qualified success, and it stands on its own 2 feet. And like Kildare deserved to have their year end on a high and dreaming of next year, rather than maybe they've sort of gotten a taste of what's coming next year. Maybe they'll use it as a positive, but it sort of takes a bit of the gloss off what they achieved in Croke Park the previous Sunday.
Definitely. I think if you could do maybe something like you do with the Tailteann Cup and have the McDonagh Cup final as maybe a double header or one of the All-Ireland semi-finals, maybe that's something that could work. But I don't think it's working at the minute when you see 2019 Laois are the last team and the only team to get through to an All-Ireland quarter-final. And as you mentioned, tough for both teams. I'd say it was tough for Laois to try and lift their players for Tipperary, particularly after their second defeat in a McDonagh Cup final, second year in a row as well. And for Kildare, it's tough. They thought their year was so positive, and then to get a hammering like this, maybe it's even something you consider of maybe putting someone else up in Leinster, because I think it's very hard for Kildare to survive now in Leinster realistically next year. Like, already they're probably favourites to come straight back down to the Joe McDonagh Cup, and that's tough for them to try and even develop as a Liam McCarthy team.
Yeah, I just see it. I suppose we worry if there's too much of a gap now between the top maybe 10 or 11 teams and the rest. And I think that's probably the way it has to go. And I know there's probably is a clamour, and I think it's growing. And we heard Peter Queally say it, that maybe the 4 teams and maybe Munster and Leinster start to come out, and maybe that's where the preliminary quarterfinals come in. And I was sort of thinking about that this morning, and I don't think it would take an awful lot of the competitiveness out of the province, and I'd explain why. Is that, like, I think the higher up the province you finish, like, if you get through the top two, you're in a provincial final. The winner is in an All-Ireland semi. The loser's in a quarter final. And if you had 3 versus 4, like, it's an extra game. It's an extra game in the legs. Like, I think there's, I do think, like, if 4 come out of Munster, 4 in Leinster, I still think you'd have the competitive edge, but you don't want to be the 5th team left out of it. Like, and even if you finish 4th, you have to go on. You potentially have to play 2 extra games before you get to Croke Park, and like that's a lot in the legs and all.
Yeah, it is a lot, but I suppose that's I suppose you prefer to have a lot more in the legs than to be sitting idle as they are now, like, and I mean, you look at Clare or Waterford, who didn't get out of Munster this year, and you're saying to yourself, Clare and Waterford on a bad day would probably beat Laois and Kildare, on a good day, to be perfectly frank about it. And the same in Leinster, where you're looking at maybe an Offaly or a Wexford in the same kind of a light, like, So, like, in terms of merit, those counties probably deserve to be in your preliminary quarterfinals rather than the McDonagh Cup winners. I'd also agree with you, Shane. I think it doesn't make for a nice bookend to the season for the likes of Kildare, who had such a great win in the McDonagh Cup and really, I suppose, celebrated it well, and they ought to do so. And then to the last game of the year to fall the way they fell, the same with Laois. Very, very difficult for Laois to lift themselves after losing a second McDonagh Cup final in succession. Very, very difficult. I happened to be going into O'Moore Park on Saturday when the players were going in, and I could tell you from the looks on their face that they want to be anywhere else because they knew what was coming.
Yeah.
So I think it's something that they'll have to look at. And you know what, the pathway that you just outlined there, I don't think there's a whole lot wrong with that at all.
No, and like you would think, hypothetically, if last weekend it was Tipperary at home to Wexford and Dublin at home to Clare, like, that's, you probably get a full house in Parnell Park. You get 15,000, 20,000 in Thurles, and both Dublin and definitely Tipperary. I think the both teams were probably gotten a bit more from those games. And maybe you don't want a severe test, maybe 6 days out or 7 days out from an All-Ireland quarter final, but I suppose it would have focused the minds a bit more too, Paul.
Yeah, and even with how condensed the season is, you want as many eyes as possible on these games. And I'd say there was a good few hurling people who really didn't mind if they didn't see these 2 preliminary quarterfinals with the way they were at the weekend. And as you mentioned there, if you had Clare even coming in there in 4th place in Munster or Waterford, whoever it was, that definitely, it'd create a buzz, and there'd be a huge buzz around these games. I think even we've seen at a minor level too, how the 3rd and 4th going into preliminary quarterfinals, it has worked, in fairness. Even see Clare this year at minor level, how they've benefited from going through the preliminary quarterfinal route. But I definitely think if you had those 3rd and 4th place cross playing each other, there'd be a great buzz, and it'd add to the hurling season as well. And maybe it's something for the GA now to consider, because it's unfair, as we mentioned, on these McDonagh teams as well, to be thrown into the deep end as well, particularly for Kildare. Like, they had no experience of really playing a Lee McCarthy team at all.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think it's probably because we've always known that maybe in the last few years the hurling is the thing at the start of the championship, because it's front loaded, whereas now the football championship is the thing, because their group stage is in the back end of the championship, and when hurling has gone a bit quiet, so hurling could probably do it an extra couple of games, maybe in around the middle of June window, to just I suppose it does, like, the round robin is so good, like, and like it's nearly week on week, and it kind of loses a bit of traction even around the provincial finals, because you're having the 2 week gaps, and like, for all the people who say it's not. It's hard on the players going week on week. Geez, even a fortnight's break is, you do lose the interest levels or the focus levels tend to fall off a small bit now, don't they? Even within the media, like, it's what's next.
Well, that's it, Shane. And like, even last weekend, when you look at the 2 hurling games, like, you pick up the papers on Sunday and on Monday, like, and there'll be little enough in them, a kind of an account of the game is about the size of it. And I suppose, like, a little bit like the football too. When there's so many football games on, you tend to maybe zone in on one or two that you really want to look at or really want to see. But then when you've got little or no hurling to look at, you kind of do zone out a little bit. All right, I think though the football has been there's been a huge sea change in terms of football, that you're actually earmarking the matches you want to watch now, because they're going to be decent, whereas last year or the years before you take it or leave it. To be honest, the Sunday game highlights would do for in lots of cases, but that's the rule changes have really improved that. But you would be just a little bit afraid that if we continue going the way we're going with long gaps and that you're going to lose some of the maybe the non-partisan hurling people, maybe the take it or leave it kind of people, and then obviously you're heading into a situation where if you win this weekend, you're playing the following weekend, so you've got a run of matches. Then you got your break before an All-Ireland semi-final and All-Ireland final. So you want to be keeping hurling at the forefront if you can all the time, and to give people that option.
Yeah, I suppose to move on from that and look ahead to next weekend, I suppose we'll start with the one that's focusing our minds here. Tipp against Galway, 6:15 in the Gaelic grounds on Saturday evening. And Paul, I'll start with you, and just to get a feel for how things are in Galway after the Leinster final. I suppose we're all sitting down that's Sunday thinking we're going to get a reaction from Galway after the Nolan Park game, and I don't think it ever came. Even the first 25 minutes when I was trying to pint for pint, it was a very sort of a flat, nondescript game. But when Kilkenny hit another gear, Galway just weren't able to go with them.
Yeah, it's, to be honest, a lot of Galway supporters don't know where we are at all going into this weekend. There's more questions than answers currently with this team at the minute. The first day out in the Leinster Championship against Kilkenny down in Nolan Park, it was really disappointing, and then obviously we bounced back impressively a week later against Offaly, bet Wexford, bet Antrim, and the Dublin game then ultimately was a Leinster semi-final to decide who was going to meet Kilkenny in the Leinster final. And we were impressed enough against Dublin with the way we performed that day, considering Dublin knocked us out a year previously and we didn't get out of Leinster. But then the Leinster final, as you mentioned, just really disappointing. As you mentioned there, 9-8, it sort of felt like nearly a challenge match at stages. There was just a flatness to it, and then TJ gets the goal before half time, and it was just such a sucker punch because Galway you would have been happy enough going in 9-8, but then that third quarter, Kilkenny just took control and leading by 13 points at one stage. Galway just really went out of that game, and then to make it even more frustrating, we finished with a strong 10 minutes and we're starting scratching our heads then. So yeah, it's really hard to know, and I think the starting 15 for Galway is going to be so fascinating this weekend because there will be changes made. I feel Galway are going to have to introduce pace into the team for this weekend just to deal with that Tipp running game. Like, I'd be very surprised if there wasn't 4 or 5 changes, I'd be thinking anyways, for this weekend. Fintan Burke's obviously a doubt with coming off with a knee injury this weekend, but other than that, everyone else seems to be fit. But yeah, I think Galway fans really this weekend are going to the Gaelic grounds in hope, more so than actually believing that they can overturn Tipp. And that's probably disappointing because as Galway fans, we love to be going up against Tipp and believing we can turn them over. But we're just hoping for a big performance, because even with the way the minors and 20s have went over the last few weeks, that's been disappointing too. So I think the performances will be the big one for Galway anyways this weekend.
So listen to Paul there. No, we've heard this before, and that's when Galway are probably at their most dangerous, like when expectation is low, and I suppose you're never more dangerous than coming off a bad performance, because like they were, in fairness, like we've seen this from them earlier this year. They came off against Kilkenny, poor banana skin in Tullamore against Offaly, and were very, very good. And really full. Like, it just shows you when they're on it. And we saw it in the Leinster final for 10 or 15 minutes. They're very, very good. But as Paul says, like they've been very, very inconsistent, even from the first day in the league up in Pearse Stadium or Tipperary. Okay, it was a very much, I'd say, second string Galway team, but you would have said first day out, both teams in the same boat, sort of rebuilding. Tipperary sort of came out with the right attitude that day and sort of had that same attitude right through the season.
Yeah, like I suppose that first day in Salt Hill in the league, it kind of took me by surprise a little bit, to be honest, that Tipperary came out of it so comprehensively, and maybe also the way that Galway kind of folded in the second half when the screw was turned on them. Now, in saying that, the personnel will be very, very different to what will turn out on Saturday evening in Salt Hill, or in Gaelic grounds, I should say. But Shane, the two comments that have been very, very common in any conversations I've had with people over the last week or so in relation to the Galway match. Number one, there's always a big performance in Galway in the season, a big one. And number two, they love playing Tipp, in the championship. And when you marry the two of them together, we'd be going down to Limerick on Saturday with a fair degree of expectation of a hell of a challenge. I think Galway are going to bring something that we haven't seen from them so far this year. Maybe we saw glimpses of it in the Leinster final, but if Galway can sustain that kind of performance for anything longer than the 7 or 8 minutes that they produce in the Leinster final, it's going to be a big, big day for them, and it's going to be a big, big challenge for Tipp. So, over the last sort of, I suppose, 20, 25 years or so, anytime Galway have met, well, even further, go back to the late 80s there in those great teams that Cyril Farrell had with Galway, anytime Tipperary and Galway have met, it has been one way or the other. Very little in it between the two teams, even though we're talking about entirely different teams now at this stage, but very, very little in it. Tremendous rivalry, a rivalry that maybe would have spilled over at times into something a little bit more, maybe even bitterness towards the early 90s and that, but great rivalry nonetheless, and it's still there. I think we're going to see big time on Saturday evening in Limerick. We're going down there knowing that we were so flat against Galway 2 years ago that we want to rectify that, and I would presume that Galway are going to come saying after the Leinster final performance they owe their supporters something big on Saturday evening. It's an All-Ireland quarter-final. That's the one thing that we tend to kind of forget. It is an All-Ireland quarter-final. Win that game and you're into Croke Park again for the first time for Tipp. Galway will return to the scene of the crime to try and overcome Cork in the semi-final. So I really think that from a Tipp perspective, we're going down there knowing exactly what we're facing, exactly what's going to be in front of us. And I think if we're not on it, we're going to be in trouble. Simple as that.
Yeah, and I suppose, Paul, it's hard not to preface the game by looking back to 2 years ago. Both teams in exactly the same scenario. Tipp coming through a preliminary quarter final. Galway coming off a Leinster final loss, and I think both teams probably owe us a classic because, that has to be one of the worst inter-county games ever that day. Like, I think Tipp were very poor, but Galway were poor, but slightly less so, and won the game. But Galway should have won the game by 8 or 10 points, but they were hanging on at the finish. Like, it was just not. There's not something you would expect from both teams. I'd be expecting, but I think we both teams coming in slightly differently this time. I think Tipp sort of had lost their edge maybe against Waterford in the Munster round robin, Costa McClace in the Munster final. I think they took the frustration out in Offaly the week before, and I think the edge was gone out of them. Galway probably left the Leinster final behind them 2 years ago at the Cillian Buckley goal at the end, and probably a bit frustrated as well, and maybe a little hungover too, but they just about got the job done that day. So I would say Tipp are probably coming in this time in better form. Galway, I'd say, were playing better 2 years ago than they were this year, but both are still in the same money at the same junction in the road.
Yeah, I remember even that day there's a real flatness to it, but the flatness probably got lost because we were just so devastated after the Cillian Buckley goal, after Kilkenny breaking our hearts. We would have taken any win that day, but I'm hoping for a classic anyways, because when these two counties produce a classic, it's just enthralling stuff. And yeah, like as you mentioned, I think Galway are nearly at the stage where maybe Liam Gall was with Tipp under his first year, trying to figure out a few things. And I think for Micheál, he's definitely figuring out things as each game goes along and what's working. the fascinating thing for Galway supporters this weekend is going to be, does Gavin Lee stay at 6, or is he going to shake it up? It's been a project, and like Gavin hasn't played much hurling at centre back before this year. For his club Clanbridge, he would have played midfield and in the half forward line. So, but I think Micheál probably will stick with him, because I don't think he can change it now, and they've only had 2 weeks since the Leinster final. I just think they have to stick with it now, because I think if you're to change your 6 and shake it up, it's a lot to move around, and then you're bringing someone else in, and you're probably pushing Gavin further forward. But it's going to be fascinating.
How big of a loss was Derek Fahy for the Leinster final in goals? Like, we know how pivotal that goalkeeping role is now, and it's not no reflection on Éanna Murphy or the young chap at the Walshes that it both got game time. But in terms of restarts and controlling and how they're set up, like, how big of a loss was he, and how big of a help would he be back this weekend?
I think he'll be a big addition back there, but there's no doubt that Éanna has the experience, but Éanna doesn't really have the experience this year. He played that game against Tipp in the first league game, and he played down in Cork, but outside of that, he hasn't played this year. So he played 2 games. He hadn't played a championship game. Darragh played most of last year as well. So you're nearly going back to probably 2 years where Éanna got a consistent run in the team. And for your keeper as well, and for puck outs, because Galway have struggled this year on their puck out as well, winning primary possession. So I definitely think he was a big loss. And then, like, you did feel for Darragh Walsh. He was thrown in the deep end straight away. Like, that was his first game he's played for the Galway seniors in competitive action this year. So it was a lot to ask of him. And then everything that happened with the goal, it was just devastation really for the poor young lad. But like, he does have a big future ahead with Galway Ireland, so you wouldn't be too worried about that. But I think Derek's a big addition back, because he's just played more games this year, and he's been the regular goalkeeper, you could say. Then in front of him, I imagine Dahill go to 3. Darren Morrissey probably will come in at cornerback, and then if Finton isn't fit, you could see someone like Jack Grealish maybe come into the team, or someone like Joshua Ryan get a chance. I think Galway are going to push Pádraig Mannion out to the halfback line this weekend.
I don't think if they had everyone, I don't think they could afford to play Pádraig, Dahi, and Finton, just assuming they're powerful, but like this Tipp inside. Well, I would say Tipp's inside forwards are not quick, but they're clever. Maybe then if you slot maybe a Jake Morris in for a spell or something, Tipp or Andrew Orman, Tipp have legs then in there. So I suppose there'll be a bit of horses for courses maybe going on.
Yeah, I think so as well, and I think you need a bit of pace there. Even if you look at McCarthy and Ford and John McGrath, I think they do need to have a bit of pace there. And I think even moving Pádraig out to the halfback line will give Galway more of a platform for better delivery, because they really struggled on it against Kilkenny. Like, they just kept landing the ball down on top of Richie Reid and Hugh Lawler. And I think if you have Pádraig there, his delivery will definitely give the Galway forwards a better chance of winning that ball anyways. I think maybe we might see Dahi Burke over on Darren McCarthy. Just the fact that Galway will see this as an experienced man who's been there, he's done it. And Darren McCarthy's a fantastic hurler, but he doesn't ultimately have the experience that maybe Dahi Burke has. And maybe that's something that the Galway management might target this weekend.
Yeah. With another one, and I thought he was very lively when he came on against Kilkenny, Tiernan Killeen. Would he have a chance of starting? I just thought he was showing for the ball in the half forward line more than other players, and like, especially if you're playing Cathal Mannion inside, you need somebody showing for it outside alongside Conor Whelan.
Yeah, I was impressed with Tiernan when he came in. 2 or 3 points in fairness to him, and he brought a real impact. He won the ball, and he just took on that Kilkenny defence. I'd say if you're looking at it, it's probably going to come down maybe between Tiernan Killeen and John Fleming. Now, John Fleming does a lot of the kind of dirty work and gets around the place and comes deep at stages. He's nearly like a third midfielder at stages. Unless maybe they push John Fleming into the midfield, because I think they probably will push Keenan Fahy back into midfield this weekend, because TJ Brennan's probably been one of our most consistent performers this year throughout the championship. So probably would expect TJ and Pádraig to go on the wings and Gavin at 6, and then it could see a midfield like John Fleming and Keenan Fahy, or maybe even Ronan Glenn, because he did bring energy to it when he came on there in the Leinster final. Sean Lennon is someone maybe that could push back into the half-back line too, but I definitely think they're going to keep David in reserve this weekend. I was only saying to someone yesterday, it could be a stage where David Burke and Noel McGrath enter the field at the same stage.
I was thinking exactly the same. If one decides to move, the other will nearly come on at the same time. They'll nearly be marking each other doing the warm up. Like it's like both have the potential, Noel, to be the game changer with 20 to go.
Yeah, I mean that's it, and what men to have to bring on to change the game if you can, you know, a lot of experience. I'd say the average age will jump up fairly significantly if the two boys come on at the same time. But like age is one thing, experience is another thing, and like you know, from a Tip perspective, Shane, we've seen how Noel McGrath can unlock other teams and oppositions with his hurling brain and what he can do. And similarly for Galway, I mean, like, you know, the lads have a hell of a lot of experience. And I suppose there's also the thing that when those guys come into a team, it lifts not just the supporters in the stands, but it lifts the guys around them as well. And because they know exactly what they can do, and they know if they can get them the ball, the damage that they can do with it. So it gives other teammates a kind of an outlet, if you want to call it that, when they come in. So that'll be one to watch on the sidelines on Saturday. That's if they don't start, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose before we touch on maybe Tip start lineup, but just Noel, from a Tip management point of view, looking and planning for Galway, like I'd say this is going to be difficult because, as Paul was saying, like there could be a lot of changes. I'd say they'll be planning for different scenarios. Say Keenan Fahy either wing back or midfield, or Pádraig Mannion cornerback or wing back, Conor Whelan wing forward or corner forward, Cathal Mannion full forward, centre forward, midfield. Like you think 2 years ago, he absolutely killed us that day. He was kind of given a free role, and I'm thinking he's kind of. I'd be very surprised if Robert Doyle is not tasked with following him. And like Robert, there's Deslie Hutchinson, Tony Kelly, Alan Connolly. For a guy in his debut season, it's nearly the bigger the name, the better. Like he just doesn't get fazed by who he's asked to follow.
Yeah, he has a great attitude, Shane, hasn't he? And he really just goes at it. And you know, I mean, we've seen him driving out in front of some of those marquee names that you've mentioned there, and taking ball in front of him, and equally then when those guys have possession, that he's well able to dispossess them. But I think it's going to be an interesting one to see who picks up who. You know, will Ronan Maher go over and Conor Whelan, for instance? Will, you know, what will happen in the inside line? One of the things, I suppose, that maybe that we picked up from last Saturday afternoon too, was that, you know, with Brian O'Mara dropping back into full back in the absence of Owen Connolly, that there is a fair old degree of flexibility in that Tipperary defence. And we have seen Robert Doyle coming out to the half back line. We know Michael Breen can operate out there. We know Ronan can operate back at 3 if needs be. And you know, so there is a lot of flexibility in that line. And I think the old thing of, you know, your cornerback has to stay cornerback no matter who's there, or your fullback can't be shifted out to fullback. We've seen Owen Connolly come to centre as well. So I think Tipperary would probably feel that they're well placed to go man for man wherever the opposition player will line up. And I would be surprised, like you, I would be surprised if they're not detailed to pick up particular players, and that they will do that, you know. Probably still see a situation where Craig Morgan will sit deep and act almost as the sweeper in that role that Ronan Maher has played so often. But I would think that Ronan will be picking up Conor Whelan, you know, because of the height and the strength and all of that, you know.
I'd be different. I'd be thinking Michael Breen has marked Conor Whelan the last couple of times in the league, and he definitely has the legs to match him. Like, and he's sort of that leaves who does Ronan go on? Like, does Ronan go out in the wing and give us the outlet, maybe under the high ball? And I was just looking at the team from 2 years ago, and definitely the last 10 years, I think the fact that Joseph Cooney is not there anymore is a huge disadvantage for Galway, and a huge help for Tip. He has killed us those 2 times, and then Gerard McInerney on the other side. I think Galway haven't replaced those two. Like, they were two pillars up in the half forward line and half back line, Paul.
Yeah, we're really starting to realise what Joseph Cooney did for us over the last decade nearly. And that's ultimately why Conor Whelan has had to play in the half forward line this year, and it's probably frustrating for Galway fans because you've seen Conor Whelan play more back the field in the Leinster final than probably taking on his man. He had to come deep and he had to get on. Maybe it was a low ball that was sort of being given to him, and he was picking it up, getting on puck outs, and we've struggled so much on the puck out this year. I'm probably thinking that Conor Whelan is going to stay at 11, and even Brian Kincannon could move out to 10, just to, I suppose, have that bit more of an outlet for the puck outs. And then it's probably John Fleming or Tiernan Killeen. Kevin Cooney was probably the biggest positive coming out of the Leinster final. He got 7 balls, he got 3 points and 3 frees. So it's great to see him coming back into form. He had a nasty enough hamstring injury last year. Cahill did go inside then for the end of the Leinster final and did well, so maybe that's something Galway might examine, but he will drift at stages. The other corner, it could easily be someone like Anthony Burns. Like, he's had a few chances this year, and he's really built on his club form from Loughrea, so maybe he's someone who might be given the nod in the corner. But there's a good few young lads pushing, like even Colin Malloy got a chance early on the championship, and he did well. So you wouldn't be surprised if even Malloy was given a chance, or Burns or someone like that. That's what it feels like, anyways. Or maybe they might
or
go
with the spring. And I guess we have an Ireland that's really fallen out of favour. Could the spring young rabbit or even Aaron Island, just a fresh young buck, just who might come of age. Like, from the outside looking in, it does look like a Galway team that needs a spark from somewhere. Like, and maybe some of those one young lad might do that. Yeah, if they perform.
Yeah, I just find it very hard to see Rabbit or Ireland, just the fact we haven't seen them. And I think from a Galway perspective and supporters perspective, we need to realise that Aaron Ireland and Jason Rabbit did the leaving cert this year. Like, I think it'd be a lot to ask to throw them in. And Rory Burke is someone we've seen at 20s level, but like, he only came on against Kilkenny. He hasn't really featured outside of that, and that was in the round robin game. So I think it would be a lot to ask. But I wouldn't be surprised either to see Galway to go back to someone like Conor Cooney this weekend, because he's been there, he has the experience, and coming on the back probably of the defeat, you want that and bit of experience. So Conor Cooney is easily someone they could go back to. And Evan Ireland, I honestly couldn't tell you what's happening there, because no one in Galway seems to know the story. He's not even making the 26. Like, it's not as if a story where he's on the bench, and he would be a player that you could definitely bring in, and maybe if he was to come in, he goes back on the frees, given the free taker he is. So that'd be interesting, but hard to see him play this weekend. So, but easily could go back to someone like Conor Cooney or Jason Flynn. I think that's the big difference. Like, you could probably pick 13 or 14 of the Tipperary team, and maybe there's one change or two, but from a Galway perspective, we've a lot of different question marks coming into this weekend.
Yeah, I suppose that's the one thing. I suppose we're in Tip. We're sort of, I wouldn't say confident, but it's encouraging that sitting here now, Noel, probably 24 hours out from probably the team announcement, we can nearly pick the start 15. Assuming Owen Connolly is right and Jake Morrison comes straight back in, they will come back in, and probably Joe Caesar and Seamus Kennedy drop out, maybe Samo Farrell or Alan Tynan slot into the midfield. They'll be the two changes. Like, we can nearly name the starting 15 right now.
I think we can, Shane, and I think that's a positive from a Tipperary perspective, because I suppose at the start of the year, could we have named 15? Could we probably have named maybe 10, maybe at the start of the year, maybe
even that, maybe.
Yeah, maybe even less. I was going to say, but more or less from the outset, once the championship started, our numbers have been much higher, as you would expect. But I think that also shows that we have kind of acquired or developed a level of strength and depth that we might not have thought was there at the start of the year as well. And you're looking at a situation there where even the 15 that started last weekend, and as you mentioned, Jake Morrison, Owen Connolly being injured, we brought on 5 subs, and we still had the likes of the 2 Statums who have been championship starters to call upon, and didn't come in at all, and others. They're just names that come off the top of my head. So I think we have a strength in depth that we haven't had in a while. And anytime, if you have designs on winning anything or achieving anything, you have to have 24 players, 23, 24 players that you can call upon, that you can say, look at. Putting that player in is not going to damage your overall team. In fact, it's going to benefit them. And Alan Tynan coming in last week, getting a match under his belt, that's a big plus as well, I think, for Tipp. Low tempo and all as that game was, it was still a championship game. It still gave them the opportunity to go out there and actually do it. So I think that's a big plus from a Tipp perspective. But I suppose one of the things that we haven't touched on maybe, is the presence of Eamon O'Shea in the background there for Galway as well. So Eamon, I was going to say he knows where the bodies are buried in Tipperary, but he certainly knows all there is to know about Tipp, And of course, Mihal was in the Tipp camp as well some time ago. So it's a long time ago now. There wasn't too many players left in it, but it just adds another little level of intrigue to it. It'll be interesting, or maybe difficult even to watch Eamon going up and down the sidelines against Tipp in a championship match.
Yeah, I was looking, you think, assuming that the 15 we think will start, you sort of know Noel McGrath is going to come on. Seamus Kennedy is going to come. That's experience. Oisín O'Donoghue is going to bring youthful exuberance into the forward. Like Sean Kennelly, we know, is a good finisher. He's a very good player in the last 15 minutes of a match. I thought Peter McGarry's cameo last weekend against Laois, his full senior hurling debut, he came in for Andrew Ormond and he played the very same role. It was like, Andrew, you're coming out, Peter in. You're doing we didn't even miss Andrew. Andrew in his 4th start in a row. He's an integral part of the team now. His work rate is incredible. He loves he knows he's going to get hit at centre forward. It's such a crowded area. His willingness to show for the ball is. I think it's the other players around them are saying, God, if this lad is able to take belts and win frees, God, we have to do the same.
Yeah, and we can probably thank Johnny Murphy for it because if Andrew or if Darren McCarthy hadn't been suspended, Andrew probably wouldn't have gotten to start in the second round of the championship, and he's been a revelation. But Shane, I think what we're seeing now with Andrew is something that in mid-Tipperary we have been looking at for quite some time. In his performance with J.K. Brackens, he has been their go-to man in the forward line for a long time. And it was a case of trying to get him to transfer that form into the inter-county scene. And it's funny, some players are really good to come on in a match and to make an impact. I think Andrew's actually the opposite. I think Andrew's a far better starter than maybe a guy to come in and make a difference. But what he has really done is he has brought a lot of pace to that half forward line, almost in the same vein as Jake Morris, and that has relieved some of that pressure on Jake Morris and allowed him to roam a little bit, to pop up in the full forward line if needs be or whatever. Andrew has been a revelation for Tipp, and I jokingly said it in relation to the suspension of Darren McCarthy that he got in, but I think being honest about it, when he was picked to start against Clare, we kind of went, oh, okay. Came on against Cork in that game down in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, didn't exactly set the scene alight. I think he strike the post.
Yeah, get a goal chance. Yeah, no, he had a goal chance but mishit it. But he was busy.
But certainly to see him starting at centre forward was a big thing. And again, it's like the old thing, a forward, shove him in corner forward and see how he get on. We didn't do that. We started him at centre forward, put him right in the middle of the action. And I think what Liam and his selectors have been seeing in Dr. Morris Park and in Semple Stadium when they've been in their training, they trusted what they saw. They said, this guy is ready. This guy is ready for a big role at centre forward. Kind of reminded me a little bit of the way Bonamar was sprung into the team back in 2010, although Bonner would have been coming in from a much colder position, But Andrew has certainly helped to, I would almost go so far as to say, Shane, that he has transformed the forward line.
Yeah. I suppose, Paul, I was looking at the half-forward line from the quarter-final 2 years ago. To Seamus Kennedy, Jason Ford, Nolan McGrath. It's probably going to be Jake Morris, Andrew Ormond, either Sam O'Farrell or Alan Tynan. Way more pace, way more athleticism. It's completely different trait that they're bringing this time. Even looking, Seamus Callan was full forward 2 years ago. There's way more legs inside as well with Darren McCarthy. John McGrath is back to his best. That it does feel like it's a Tip forward line that's it's a lot fresher. It's a lot definitely a lot more energetic than it was 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting how Galway go about stopping this Tip running game. And as I mentioned earlier on, Morris is going to drop deep at stages. Ormond might even drop deep at stages. And I think Gavin on stages is just going to have to front up and go with them, because I think if you let them go and they create overlaps and they're coming from all sides, it's not much good sitting back. Or maybe even it's a case of one of the midfielders that they'll pick up Morris or one of those, or Ormond if they go deep, because they're going to have to. You just can't be letting them roam, and it's the one big concern you'd have for Galway. Like, how do they deal with this pace? Because I've been really impressed with Tip's pace this year. Even the first day when I was at the Limerick game, I thought their character that day was really impressive. But the Clare game too, they were, the way Tip are going about getting goals this year, it's impressive stuff. But for Galway, I think the key to settle into this game early is just avoid an early goal. Just stay in the game, stay fighting, and just don't let Tip get a goal early. And I think if Galway can be in this game at halftime, I think there's a big chance they could go on and win this. But that's going to be hard for Galway to stop this Tip team from getting goals, because they've been getting goals for fun this year. And like as you mentioned, there's a fair difference in the Tip pace in the current team compared to what it was a few years ago. And I think for Galway, they might have to leave a gap or two there in the half-back line at stages, and that could create more space. But I think there's going to have to be a few individual battles here that are won to keep this Tip forward line at bay now on Saturday evening.
I'm sure as a Galway man, you're thinking, where can we get at Tip? And you say you would have seen Tip a couple of times this year with your role with the Limerick leader. Like, is there any aspect of the Tip maybe set up? And I suppose we probably, as I said, we probably know what their starting 15 is, like, that you feel Galway can get. And I suppose maybe Owen Connolly maybe not being 100% if he hasn't been able to train maybe properly the last week or two, he could potentially be one. Do you put maybe a quick lower center of gravity guy maybe on him to try, maybe if he's not at 100%, that sort of thing? Where do you see maybe off or Galway having an edge maybe in terms of putting Tip under pressure?
Yeah, as you mentioned, Robert Doyle's been really impressive this year, and I was kind of thinking the same, that he would pick up Cathal Mannion, but I think that's going to be a very hard task for Doyle, given the form Cathal Mannion is in. Like, he's been our best player this year by quite a bit, and he's going to stay in it.
I'd say it's hurler of the year in the country. Like, if you were to pick hurler of the year now, and say if he gets through, it'd be hard to stop him winning the whole thing, even if they only got to a semi. But I'd say definitely hurler of the year for me at the moment.
Yeah, and you'd figure he definitely has to get nominated for an All-Star, even if Galway were to go out on Saturday evening, just given the form he was in. But I think for Doyle, that'll be a challenge. Then Kevin Cooney inside, I think if we can feed him the right ball, he can ask Tip plenty of questions. And then if Whelan and Kincannon can get motoring on Saturday evening, I think if you could get 3 or 4 of that Galway forward line motoring Saturday evening in the Gaelic grounds, I think we definitely can still ask Tip plenty of questions. And it could be a case where Galway decide to go back to Conor Whelan inside. I know it's a different Tip backline, but if you remember that game during COVID in the Gaelic grounds, Conor Whelan caused Tip plenty of issues. Now I know it's a different Tip backline this time around, but for Conor Whelan, he struggled on Hugh Lawler. It's not a Hugh Lawler he's coming up against this weekend, so maybe that might be a case where Galway decide to throw him inside. But again, it just comes to that quality of ball, and we just need to feed this forward line right, because there's 3 or 4 forwards there. If they get going, they can definitely ask Tip plenty of questions and get some more scores. And we're probably going to have to go after goals too. It's not something we've been able to go after. Like, even if you look at that Dublin game, we got 29 points, but we didn't have many goal chances in it. I think if Galway are to kind of upset the odds this weekend, they need to go after that. But yeah, it'll be interesting. Maybe is like if Conor Whelan plays 11, is it just Ronan who picks him up?
Yeah, I was sort of thinking maybe, and I was thinking, like I would have said, if Connor's inside, Michael Breen will pick him up, but then do you drag Michael Breen too far from goal if Connor plays out? So yeah, it's an interesting one. Yeah, I can see why Noel was saying Rowan, and I say yeah, but I definitely, if Connor goes inside, I'd say Michael Breen picks him up. I wouldn't be as certain if Connor stays out in the halves for in the early going that Michael would come out.
Yeah, that was my thinking, Shane. That if he's in the half line, that is Ronan picks him up there.
Yeah.
I wouldn't see Ronan go back into the full line either to pick him up. Like Owen Connolly is fairly competitive in the air, a strong man in the air too. So that he may well be the one. But it's going back to what Paul is saying there about the quality ball coming into the Galway forward line is going to be key if Galway are to make inroads there. And I would be inclined to go a little bit the other way from a Tip perspective. I think winning the middle third is going to be key to Tipperary winning the game, because if you're winning the middle third, you're cutting off that supply line to the Galway forward. In terms of giving them quality ball, so you might get ball in there, but it might be rush ball or under pressure hit ball. Whereas if Tip can,
and if we go back to that National League match, Craig Morgan and Willie Connors were outstanding that day, and
exactly.
I just want to name check Willie Connors. Like, okay, 5 points in play. Okay, admittedly it was against Laois, but I think, like, for a guy who was taken off after 23 minutes in the league final, I don't think he played against Limerick. When he came on late against Cork, when he came on late against Clare, Tynan gets injured. He gets the start for Waterford. I thought he was very close to man of the match against Waterford. And then man of the match, he just shows you, like, and same with Andrew Ormond when Darren McCarthy was suspended. If you get an opportunity, you got to take it. Like, and he's another one of those that he's like, I cannot see him starting this weekend. I think he's guile and his eye for a pass. I think he's one of the best players in the country in terms of his efficiency on the ball. He'll never give a 50-50 ball. He'll always give a ball to the benefit of a teammate.
Yeah, and like, I suppose for a player who has relatively little actual game time in a Tipperary jersey, due in the main, I suppose, to when he came into the team first, he suffered that very bad injury down in Tralee in the opening round of Colin Bonner's reign, and that cost him a lot of time.
Good 18 months, even with Killanangan, it took him a long time to get right.
Long time, Shane. Yeah, it did. But I suppose the point I was going to make is that he's a player of a lot of experience in terms of having to cope with mental setbacks and that as well. He's battled away, and I thought, looking at him last Saturday in Portlaoise, that he was a guy who was really out to prove himself. As you say, he was very, very good against Waterford as well. Had a really good game that day. And was kind of there last Saturday saying, shooting at when the opportunity presented, but not shooting when it didn't, when it wasn't on. He wasn't trying to shoot from, difficult angles or stupid situations or whatever. We know that he has scores in his armory as well, that he's well able to do that. Maybe in the past he would have a chance shooting from different places where it wouldn't have been on. But I think that level of maturity has come to him as well now, where he realizes what he has around him, and that the out ball is always there. I thought as well, Willie was very good in that game in Salt Hill, as you mentioned earlier on. And I thought he was linking very, very well with Ronan Maher in that game when Ronan was kind of sweeping. And the amount of ball that Willie got and turned back facing his own goal to give the ball back to the quarterback almost was very telling. I recall one of the goals where Ronan delivered a crossfield ball off for Willie Connor's pass that led to the goal for, was it Andrew?
Dylan Walsh, I think.
Dylan Walsh, yes. And it was the sort of the classic move where your midfielder wins the ball, shovels it back to your quarterback who delivers that ball in. So, like, I think Willie's re-emergence this year has been a big plus for Tip. very, very difficult to leave them off after the last two performances,
Yeah. So I suppose just to reflect on the game, Paul, you were saying at the start, you're probably Galway fans going in more hope than expectation, but we know Galway have it in their locker going back 20, 30 years to pull a performance kind of against the grain in terms of against form. And I think we wouldn't be surprised if we see that. It'd be interesting to see that the Galway turnout in terms of support, like the Tipp support is back. You had people there Monday when the fixture was coming out, and Jesus, when are the tickets going on sale? Like they wanted the tickets in their hand now. Whereas Galway, I know they have their footballers up in Newry on Sunday, and I suppose some might be wondering, will we go to Newry or Limerick or both? Like how, I suppose it probably will probably not. Getting a Galway support there in big numbers, or if they're small numbers, like that could tell a lot as well. Like if you get to the last 10 or 15 minutes and Tipp having the support behind them, I remember we saw it in 2014 when Tipp got on that run in Semple Stadium and Galway were 6 up and Tipp won by 9. When Tipp get going and the support behind them, it's like a wave.
Yeah, we really don't want to hear tip on Saturday evening now as Galway fans. Yeah. But I think a good few supporters from, say, the South Galway side will travel down on Saturday evening, obviously, because Limerick is handy enough journey for them. But I wouldn't expect a massive Galway crowd just with the way the Leinster final and everything went. But like, I would be encouraging Galway fans to make the trip down and get behind this team, because obviously it is still an All-Ireland quarter-final here, and the prize is massive. I definitely am expecting some sort of reaction. I think there is a reaction in this group. They're being written off. Nobody's really giving them a chance this weekend, and that's dangerous. And even from chatting to one or two Tipp people this week, and I've kind of been saying, I Tipper favourites for this. The answer I keep getting is Galway always rises for this blue jersey, and that's what we're hoping for as Galway fans, to just rise to the occasion. Like, we didn't get out of the group last year, and we're in the last 6, and you'd hope to be back here next year, but it's still a massive prize. And I think the prize here is massive because, like, lads, whoever wins this isn't going to be given a chance. Like, Cork are already selling out trains for the All-Ireland final and everything. So I think whoever wins this, and even if you consider back to last year, Liam Cahill's side didn't get out of Munster, Galway didn't get out of Leinster. It's the prize is massive here, and it's going to be huge for whichever team can get past this weekend, and for the group in general to be into last 4. And it'll sort of be a free shot because there won't be many people tipping a Galway or Tipperary to reach an All-Ireland final.
Yeah, and I suppose from Noel, from a Tipp point of view, I think there's definitely a sense of optimism, but not overconfidence going down the zone. I think there's a full respect for Galway, particularly our recent record against them is not good. Like, there'll be nobody going down there. I think we'll be confident that if we perform, there's a good chance of winning, but we have to perform. I think the Tipp players will be motivated by 2 years ago, not the fact that they lost, but the fact they didn't perform, and I think they'll be keen to perform. And I do remember a penny for I wouldn't be surprised. I'd be cute and I'm not a betting man, but if I was to put a euro on man of the match, I'd say Jake Morris, because I'd say he'd be looking at Aidan Hart on that sideline, and Aidan sort of said before that he thinks Jake is, I wouldn't say windy, but he feels he's not the player. I think we've seen a different Jake Morris this year. He's a real leader. So I think I was coming home from a challenge match last night. I was thinking, no, Tipp's year this year is better. We got to a league final. We got out of Munster. But if we fall at a quarter final, do you call it a success? Like, it is a better year, but it would be a disappointment if it ended this weekend. Would you not think? It's hard to know how you'd rate it if they fell short this weekend.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Shane. I think right now we would say that we've had a better season than last year. Obviously, we're out of Munster. We've shown a lot of very positive signs and all that. But I think if we were to fall on Saturday, it knocks us back into maybe a halfway house kind of a category. We do travel on Saturday with a lot of confidence, maybe. Certainly in terms of where this group has come from, we're far more confident in what they can produce than heretofore. But I think the mantra is going to be, as it has been all season long, bring the performance, get to the level that's necessary, and let the result take care of itself. And I think that's what Liam Cahill and Michael Beavens and the rest of the management team will be stressing. Get to that level, lads. Get to that level. Bring that performance, and we'll see where it goes. In terms of travelling, much like South Galway, Limerick is only over the border from Tipp as well, and I would expect a big Tipp following there. There was a very good Tipp following in Portlaoise last Saturday, considering the time the game was on and all of that, and considering the fact that it was practically a dead rubber, really, you could say, that, or a foregone conclusion. I was a little surprised to see a promo there with Pádraig Maher dressed up in the Garda uniform and saying that they're expecting 25,000 in Gaelic grounds. I thought it'd be far more than that, to be perfectly honest with you, but it is what it is.
I think if both teams, particularly if Galway were going better, I definitely would have seen more. I think if you had really two teams coming in with decent form, like I think Tipp's form is better, but if Galway were coming in with more confidence and expectation, you've definitely had seen over 30,000. But like, I think it'll be a cracking atmosphere, and hopefully we'll get a right good contest. Just before we go, Paul, you're a Galway man in Wisconsin. Limerick are playing Dublin on Saturday 4:00 in Croke Park. I'd say you probably have work duties. You'll be in Croke Park rather than the Gaelic grounds. So, what's the feeling on Shannon's side after losing Munster, and the fact that I suppose we heard John Kiley saying before the Munster final that he sort of referenced Paul gone there. Hello, is he trying to log back in? Paul gone, is he? Yeah,
that's a big game too, Shane.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, I touched on it with you, Noel. In terms of Limerick not having they've had to change tack now. It's the first time since 2018 they've had to go down the quarter-final route, and they've been able to time that almost to a T. So you think after the exertions of the Munster final, I'd say they could do very little last week. Probably had an A versus B match last Saturday or Sunday, and it's all about resting for this week. So I think we expect him to win. I think a lot of it will be, can Dublin, how deep can Dublin take them into this quarter-final?
Yeah, and be honest with you, Shane, I don't see anything other than a Limerick victory. Maybe had the game been in Parnell Park, it might be a little bit different, but I think Limerick would be very, very comfortable in Croke Park, whereas maybe Dublin mightn't be. Dublin don't actually get to play in Croke Park all that often, really. A lot of their home games would be in Parnell Park. So I think Limerick would be in a good frame of mind coming out of out of Munster in the way that they came out. They lost on penalties. It's a defeat, but it's technically it's not, I suppose, in terms of playing the match and playing extra time and all that. And I think that we're going to see the resilience that John Kiley has built up in that team come to the fore. Again, they've taken knocks before and they've bounced back. I think Limerick are a very, very dangerous animal at the minute.
Yeah, I suppose, Paul, you're back online there. I was just referencing the point that since 2018, it's the first time Limerick have gone down the quarter-final route. And John Kiley sort of referenced it a lot, that the 4 weeks, and they have it off to a T. And I was just thinking, okay, they've had to change tack, or will they have decided, okay, we'll still do the same things. Maybe we'll do a heavy block of training and hope we still have enough in the tank to get through Dublin and still be peaking in an All-Ireland semi-final, or will they have had to maybe change tack for this weekend? And even if you go back to 2018, that was a new team. It was all new to them. Whereas since probably 2020, they've had that 4-week thing off to a T.
Yeah, it's fascinating that they haven't been here since 2018, as you mentioned there, in the All-Ireland quarter-final route. It'll be interesting with the Limerick starting 15, because no one really predicted Aidan O'Connor to come in for the Munster final, and I thought he acquitted himself quite well in his first competitive start for Limerick. And then Shane O'Brien comes in and he was so good. So maybe O'Connor is the player to lose out, but even from chatting to one or two ex-players, a lot of Limerick fans are keen to see Cathal O'Neill get into this team, but as one or two people have kind of been saying, it's the versatility that maybe it's coming against Cathal O'Neill, because he can play in the half-back line, he can play in midfield, he can play in the half-forward line, and he could nearly play a Roman role or go inside if he had to. So it'd be interesting with that. Like, Kylie hasn't been afraid to throw in a bolter at some stage. If you go back to Aidan O'Connor in the Munster final, Shane O'Brien the year before that in the Munster final. So it'd be interesting. And I thought even
the closer you get to an All-Ireland, you're thinking this is when Dara O'Donovan really comes into his own. And I thought Adam English was probably one of his quieter games in the Munster final. And do you push maybe him into the David Reedy role, and David Reedy drops out? It'd be an interesting thing, because we saw after the Tipperary game in Munster, where I suppose Kylie tried a few things. Kyle Hayes in the half forward line, he kind of went back to what he knew best, Dan Morrissey at full back, and the things settled down a bit. So I do wonder, after the Munster final, will he veer more back, even more to maybe what they know best, Dara O'Donovan, seen more of him, even seen more of Cathal O'Neill as well.
Yeah, and I know Dara O'Donovan missed that chance at the end against Cork, but he got a point before that, and I thought he made a good impact. And even Declan Hannon at Start of Extra Time got a point too. Maybe he's a player that might come in earlier from the bench for Limerick. So that'll be interesting. But yeah, I do agree with you. Like, there could be a temptation this weekend to push Adam English more for further forward, because we've seen the pace he has. But I still think Dublin are going to ask Limerick a few questions this weekend. I don't think they'll beat them, but I think there is pace in this Dublin forwards unit. Especially, you look at players like Keane O'Sullivan, Sean Kerry, Rhys McBride, maybe Doran Burke will come in this weekend. Fergal Whiteley, Dermot O'Dooley, who played at the weekend. Like, there definitely still is pace there, and I think Dublin will want to give a performance as well under Neil O'Callaghan, because they probably have been a bit too much up and down throughout the championship so far.
Yeah, I thought their mindset against Kildare was very, very good. Like, they killed that match off in the first 20 minutes, and Noel, I'd be sort of thinking, you get this if I get this to half time and the Dublin football crowd are coming in, and you can just say, then come on, you boys in blue, 5 or 10 minutes into second. And in fairness, Limerick don't get flummoxed by very, very much, but you just never. It might be that Dublin might feed off the crowd if the big crowd is scattering, and I still think Limerick will win it, but I don't think I don't know what the spread is. I don't see it'll be any more than maybe 4 or 5 points. I think Dublin will have a real good go at this.
Yeah, I hope to do, Shane, and really, throw off the shackles a little bit, and it's an opportunity, I suppose, in front of what will potentially be a big Dublin crowd for the last 20-25 minutes or thereabouts. So I really hope that they do, and that they bring a good performance to it. I think it would be good for the game in Dublin as well as everything else, But in saying all that, I still can't see Limerick being in difficulty going down the closing straight. I think it's going to be a case of Limerick will win it by maybe 7-8 points or thereabouts.
Yeah. And just before we go, I just reference a couple of other big games this weekend. The Tipp and Limerick are playing in the All-Ireland Camogie Championship on Saturday at 1 o'clock in Cappamore. And at the same time in Bancha, an absolutely massive game for the Tipp ladies footballers. They're playing Donegal in round 3 of the All-Ireland Championship. If Tipperary can get a win or even a draw, they'll be through to their first All-Ireland quarter-final, back as a senior team since 2019. Like, they haven't, I think, been relegation battles the last 4 or 5 years. So if they can get to a quarter-final, it's definitely a successful year, so we wish them. And that match is on TG Cahir at 1 o'clock. So anybody wants to see Tipp in action before they set off to Limerick, that's one to watch. Or even if you want to get to Cappamore first and then Tipp on into Limerick, get a bit of dinner and into the hurling match, that's a good plan of action for the day too. That's about it for this week's show. I want to thank my guests, Noel Dundon and Paul Shaughnessy of the Limerick Leader and the Moon and White podcast. We'll be back next week to review both our quarter finals. Bye for now.